I don't actually believe that they were the strongest team in the tournament last year, and I don't think they were actually even close to being the strongest team in the tournament last year. Their net boundary percentage was negative, which is unheard of for a team to win the tournament with a negative net boundary percentage. And they basically won so many clutch moments in matches. Everything that was the finest of margins, Twatia with 2 sixes after Odeon Smith's overthrow, being just one example. And there was plenty of others as well. Every kind of fine margin went their way, and for me, that is impossible to sustain in the long term, and that for me is going to be a bit of mean reversion, I think, this year for Gujarat. In terms of the holes that they needed to improve their boundary hitting, and I'm not sure that the addition of Kane Williamson is going to do that. In theory, that they could structure up to be fairly bowling strong, but they overseas pacer might. Josh Little's been injured, missed the PSL, so maybe it will be Alzari Joseph who comes in for him. They could also structure up a bit differently and play a domestic pacer such as Shivam Mavi, and then play David Miller as an overseas player. But look, Miller's reputation is a big hitter, but actually he's a player who likes to take his time to get going first before he hits. So again, this is another player who's very capable of these 20 off 20s and 25 off 25s, those type of innings. And I think that I look at this team and I think that they've got 5 or 6 players who are all capable of those type of innings. And I just wonder where these high strike rate innings are going to come from. Hardik is going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting in that respect, but he's got the responsibility of being captain, which makes it tricky from his perspective. And I don't think it's reasonable in the slightest to expect Twatia to do the same thing this year as he did last year. So for me, a lot of question marks. As I say, mean reversion is something that I really expect for this team, and I think they've got a lot of holes, particularly in their batting group.
Gurkar, do you echo those thoughts?
I do to some extent, wherein I don't think that they are going to be as lucky as what they were last time. And before people take offense on this, I just want to mention that Hardik himself had mentioned that they were quite lucky. What I do think is that they had Rashid Khan coming in at 7 with I think they were Tia at 6, Miller at 5, and Hardik at 4. In my view, they certainly need another batter. Rashid Khan at number 7 is a spot too high. He's a very good number 8, probably an above average number 8. But I think at number 7, it's a little too much. You probably need a proper batter there sometimes, because not every time it is going to happen that you will not have a collapse. Because last season, one other thing that rarely happened with Gujarat was that they hardly collapsed. That there was hardly no collapse that happened with that team. So I do think that they probably need an extra batter over there. And for me, the concern is going to be if they in terms of overseas players, especially, like, do they go for reputations over performances? Because they bought Kane Williamson, and at the auction they said that Kane Williamson will start. Now, to me, that's not a great move. I'd rather have Matthew Wade play at number 3 or even at number 5 over Kane Williamson. And even if I want to play an Indian batter, I can then maybe add another overseas pacer. So I really don't want them to start with Kane Williamson. Another thing, like how Dan was mentioning, a lot of things came together for them. Would be now Riddhiman Saha was able to do the role of a power play enforcer quite well for them. And this is something that we don't say often in T20s, but he was timing his dismissals to perfection. As soon as the 7th over was there, or the 8th over was there, he was finding a way to get out, because he knew his job was done. in one of the games where he knew that conditions were a little difficult and now was the time for a launch pad, he probably had a 21 ball 25 and then he dismissed himself. So he was very very good in terms of finding an exit point for himself. Not sure if someone like Riddhiman Saha can also replicate the kind of season that he had last time. Yeah,
Yep.
you can.
So I think, in my opinion, one of the most underrated aspects of Gujarat's title season last year was the way Miller batted, and especially against spin. I mean, his game. There were question marks around his ability to do that, but he proved everyone wrong, and his game against spin has gone strength to strength since then. At least that's what the numbers suggest. Uh, Regarding Kane Williamson, I tend to agree. I mean, it is a baffling addition in the first place. Uh, Kane himself would be very happy that he finally gets to be teamed up with Rashid again after what Hyderabad did to him. But other than that, I mean, adding Kane to the 11 would be. I mean, there is. I don't see any reasonable explanation for doing that. That what would that also mean would be that they will have to resort to either Saha or KS Bharat as their wicket keeping option, because then they can't have Wade in the 11, which again, uh, just to include Williamson in the 11, they'll have to fill two spots, which could have been filled by two other batters with a higher ceiling. Yeah. So I think what we should do next is have a look at Dan's 11, and then maybe, as always, there will be avenue for us brainstorming and arriving at an ideal 11 with three people agree on. Yep. So Avnish, if you can put that graphic on. Okay, while we wait for it, Dan, if you can just walk us through your 11, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So you talk about getting Wade and Williamson in the same team being difficult, and actually, I kind of did it with this 11, but I accept that there is so many permutations of this team that could be. Yeah, we can definitely debate over the next few minutes is the overseas combos in particular. So I actually went Shubman Gill, Matthew Wade, Kane Williamson, Abhinav Manohar, David Miller, Hardik Pandya, who may well higher up the order in this 11. Rahul Tewatia, Rashid Khan, Saika Shaw, Mohammed Shami, and Shivan Mavi. Now, I definitely accept that there is a different way to structure up with this 11. You would potentially use Riddiman Saha or KS Barat as a domestic keeper over Matthew Wade, and then you could go with an overseas pacer, for example, Alzari Joseph, potentially. That would be one way of doing it, and there's probably a way of structuring up the 11 with Vijay Shankar in the team as well. So a couple of options there.
Have at present three overseas in the 11, right?
Williamson, Miller, Rashid Khan.
Yeah, three. So
Four.
my 11 would be slightly different. I definitely have Matthew Wade at three in place of Kane Williamson. I am completely on board with Abhinav Manohar being at four. I do think that Gujarat didn't really utilize him as well as they could have last season, because I think he has no business batting below Hardik. He should be batting ahead of Hardik and take the role of a spin basher, because he's done that at the lower domestic levels. And then at five, at 5, 6, 7 for me are seven is more of Rahul Tewatia. 5 and 6 are Hardik and Miller. It could depend upon what the entry points are and what kind of bowling is being bowled at that point of time. 8 Rashid. 9, I completely agree, is Sai Kishore. 10 Mohammad Shami. For me, 11 is Alzari Joseph. I really think that he needs to play, because Mohammad Shami's death bowling is not a lock. Sometimes he could really go for a lot of runs. But yeah, this is the 11 that I see, with impact players being someone like a Darshan Nalkande, who's done with the ball, who's done decently with the ball. And like you mentioned, another option which could be is that instead of having Riddhiman Saha as an opener, they could have Sai Sudarshan. Instead of maybe having someone like an Abhirav Manohar, they could even play. They could even play Vijay Shankar. They have enough options, and I'd like to see, even though this player didn't really get a lot of chances for them last time. I want to see Noor Ahmed, get a game or two somewhere, if say Gujarat have already qualified, or if they are out of the race, because I do believe he's someone who can, who can really set the stage on fire, and he has the surprise factor against teams, or probably if you're playing on a venue like, if you're playing at a venue like Chepauk, where you know that the ball is going to spin. Not the worst idea to play him instead of someone like an Alzari Joseph. So Noor Ahmed is one player I really look forward to, and then since we were talking about all rounders, there's also Jayant Yadav in the mix, who could also come in as an impact player against your left-handed heavy lineup, and bowl those couple of overs like he was doing for Mumbai whenever they were playing against someone like Delhi. So no dearth of options. I just feel that a lot is going to come down to how they fit in one of Wade or Williamson, and the other is how much does Hardik take upon himself, because a trend that I've seen with Hardik is that he sometimes wants to do everything. He wants to bowl in the power play, he wants to bowl at the death, he wants to anchor, he wants to finish. uh, you can't do that. It's impossible to do that in such a short format, and you, as a captain, you also have to realize that what are your limitations. Sometimes I feel that Hardik just wants too much out of Hardik the player, which I don't think is sustainable.
Yep, I think a few thoughts there, and my question is to Dan. Dan, do you feel you have Williamson in your 11, but do you feel replacing it with someone like a Sai Sudarshan, you're not losing a lot on batting? Whereas if you replace Shivam Mavi with an Alzari Joseph, it really adds an impetus to their bowling, because Alzari Joseph was their best dead bowler last season,
Yeah,
along with Yash Dayal.
I agree with you, Samesh. When I pick the 11, it's not necessarily that I value these certain players. There's definitely an element of what I think they're going to do in this situation as well. And I think that they've been quoted as saying that they're going to play Kane Williamson at 3. So obviously that was part of my rationale with this. Now I completely agree with you, and I've written about this a number of times before in terms of the lack of utility of an overseas anchor batter, because you can find numerous players in the domestic market who can do 90 or 95% of the same level for no money and not wasting an overseas slot. So for me, it's a great point that you make about using a Sai Sudarshan instead of Williamson, and then going with an overseas pacer. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Who's the one player that you guys think is the most indispensable to their 11? For me, it's someone like David Miller, because I feel he's really the bridge between the top order and the finishers, more than Hardik, because I really feel that with the improvement that he's done in his spin game, he's probably their most complete batter. Hardik has his struggles against short of length pace bowling, and even against away going spin, but I think Miller has probably become uh, their most complete batter. Uh, Probably the second best being Shubman Gill. So for me, someone like David Miller is extremely important for them, and I don't think they have a replacement for him, because you might try and fit Matthew Wade at 5-6 with probably Kane Williamson at 3 if Miller gets injured, but I don't think that Matthew Wade would be able to make the same impact as someone like David Miller did last season.
I would lean in a slightly different direction. I'm not actually probably Miller's number one fan compared to a lot of other people. I am going to go with what I think is a fairly obvious choice of Hardik Pandya, because I just think that he holds this whole team together in terms of balance and leadership. Leadership is in terms of we talk about him trying to do everything, and he's almost like you're growing up with a really talented young classmate at school who is really good at football, and he's taking the kick off, the free kicks, the goal kicks, the corners, the penalties, the shots, everything. And I feel like Hardik Pandya is kind of like that in this team. Now that his presence in the team is also really critical because he's clearly the fifth bowler in this team. Rahul Tewatia wasn't really trusted with the ball so much last year, and there's that from that perspective. I think he's irreplaceable. The whole balance is completely negated if Hardik Pandya doesn't play, or he's injured and can't bowl, which would potentially be a plausible scenario. So yeah, those are question marks for me in terms of how they would cope with his absence.
Yeah, to me as well, Rashid Khan is a no-brainer because if you look at Gujarat's strategy last season, it was essentially to just keep wickets in hand and bat with a stable mindset. And I think they were only able to do it because they had someone like a Rashid Khan in the 11, who that on more often than not will save those extra 10 runs which any other bowler would have given. So I think Rashid Khan's presence is very important, and not to forget his contributions with the bat at the end of the day. Because in my opinion, Rashid Khan is the best T20 player going around, and I think I don't know what Dan thinks, but if I have to pick one player, if I'm working for a team and I have to pick one player with among all of them, my first pick will definitely be Rashid Khan.
Yeah, it's difficult to disagree with that for sure, Smash. So obviously, super elite player for a number of years now. So yeah, of course, I agree. But it's interesting that the three of us have all picked different players, and I think that goes in terms of there are three, maybe four if you include Subman Gill as well, players in this team who all I feel have got to have big seasons for them to achieve a successful season as a group. If two or more of them fail, that's a huge issue.
Yep, that goes without saying. So I just have two follow-up questions. In my head, I think framing the Gujarat 11 was the toughest. And not because of the reasons that we discussed about Kolkata and Mumbai. It was more about the availability of options. Like, for example, Dan, your 11 and Gurpreet, yours as well had Sai Kishore. But then that means Yash Dayal misses out, who had an exceptional last season. Of course, if Kane Williamson plays, then Sai Sudarshan misses out. KS Bharat is one guy. Ridhiman Saha, although there are limitations, but he has done justice to his potential every time he has taken field for any side he's played in. So, I mean, do you guys echo those thoughts? The toughest 11 to frame just because of the number of options available.
Yeah, there's 10 combos you could really create here, and the management could probably still pick some other combination or permutation even after that. So yeah, absolutely.
I think it comes down to who the foreigners that they want to play. If you decide on your foreigners, then it becomes slightly easy, because if you have an Alzari Joseph, then you can play without an Yash Dayal and you can play Sai Kishore. And that means that you will not be able to play both of Matthew Wade and Kane Williamson, and someone like a Sai Kishore Sai Sudarshan can come in. And the good thing is, like, they have three wicket keeping options. Two of them are Indian wicket keepers in Saha and KS Bharat. So they've really tried to cover up as many options as it was possible in terms of backups. But what I really didn't understand is that why did they buy someone like Pradeep Sangwan in the last auction and Mohit Sharma in this auction? These buys I really couldn't make sense of. Even Kane Williamson, I do think that there were better batters out there who they could have picked for a number 3 spot. I mean, if they wanted, probably someone like a Joe Root could have been much better, because the pitch in Ahmedabad sometimes can be a little up and down, and Joe Root has played on that wicket a lot more than what probably Williamson has done, and Joe Root also offers another bowling option. So these buys I didn't understand, and sometimes I just feel that teams just go for a reputation a lot more rather than what is actually in front of them, and that can come back to haunt them. Gujarat would hope that it's not the case with them.
I agree with that. I think that there's an element of just picking known quantities as sort of bench players, if you like, rather than necessarily doing really diligent scouting of the lower levels to try and find the next up and coming superstar. Um, I'm really strong on the fact that not just in this league but worldwide, that I'm really strong on a lot of young players making up the bench, because you get a lot of benefit from, one, the theoretical continued improvement in them as they get more experience and become less naive and get more game time, work on their game and get towards peak age. And two, you get retention rights on potentially a really talented young player for not a lot of money, and potentially giving yourself the opportunity of having that player for their entire career. So I don't really understand the logic of picking, someone like a Mohit Sharma, who I think we know where his ceiling is at, and he's never. I think we're the best one in the world. Is very unlikely to be a superstar in this league anytime soon. So for me, pick the players with the highest ceiling with the upside. That's critical for me.